Hello and welcome to the Sunday special. This is going to be episode 19, and as we do each and every week, it's a little something different. This week in particular, we're going to be talking with a new game developer by the name of Bailey Armstrong, and he's putting together something I've at least never heard of before, and that is a game that tries to teach you something. It's not just mindless hack and slash or your typical fetch quests and the world is in doom and needs saving. But this one, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, he'll clarify this for us later, I believe it's called Nihongo Quest. And it will attempt to teach you Japanese, and I don't think this is promising to teach you how to speak fluently, but it certainly will be able to, you'll be able to understand it better, perhaps even play some imported games. We'll talk with him about that here very shortly. So first, we're going to take a quick commercial break, have a word from sponsor, and be right back with our special guest here on the Sunday Special. All right, everybody, we are joined by the developer of, you just said it and I completely forgot it, Nihongo? Nihongo Quest. Right. And so this is, you are the developer, correct?
That is right.
Okay, and your name is Bailey Armstrong. Welcome to the JRPG Report, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So we've been kind of teasing this for a few weeks. We finally nailed down a good date between the two of us. You know, even though with quarantine, there's still busy schedules to get around.
Never that easy, right?
It never is that easy. No, sir. So why don't you just go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and I guess why you're here.
Sure, yeah. So, as everybody knows, my name is Bailey. In case my accent didn't give it away, I'm an American. But when I graduated college, I went to Japan for about 3.5 years. I lived in the Tokyo area for 1 year in a city called Nagoya for about 2.5. It's about, an hour away on the bullet train from Tokyo, if that gives you any frame of reference. But I lived over there. I taught English for a while, did a little bit of business office work over there as well. Came back to the U.S. in late 2018, probably October, somewhere around there. And I worked at the consulate of Japan as a translator and economist for a little while. Now I work at a Japanese electronics company as normal business dude, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of that's me.
That's kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. Sounds like just an incredible journey that I'm sure a lot of listeners are very envious of. Playing the games that we do. Just to even go to visit Japan would be a dream, let alone to live there for 3.5 years.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So what was that like? Was that kind of scary, or was it exciting at the same time?
Well, of course. I mean, I didn't even visit before I went, which in retrospect was a terrible idea. But I decided to go ahead and make the plunge and move over there. And yeah, first, there was a lot that you had to get adjusted to. So like the second or third day I was there was a typhoon. And I wasn't checking the weather. Goodness. I didn't understand what was going on around me, but I'm from the Chicagoland area. We don't get typhoons. You know what I mean?
No, you don't get much of any type of hurricanes, typhoons, none of that. Yeah.
Nothing like that. And so there's a lot of walking that you had to do. So I'm going to the convenience store one day and I take out my umbrella and I unfold it. I'm like, oh yeah, rain's really bad today. Walking to the convenience store like there's no big deal. I get back to my company and they're like, why are you just walking outside in the middle of the typhoon? I'm like, oh, So, I mean, in addition to those types of things, I mean, right, there's the language, there's the culture. There are so many things that you have to get adjusted to. But at the same time, it's a really fun country to live in. There's a lot of great people there. There's a lot of great food. I'm not sure if people know that about Japan, but the food, in my opinion, it's A+, one of the best in the world. And of course, I think it's not all fun and games, but overall, I really enjoy my.
I'd say so. That's really cool. All just hearing about that makes me want to go even more. But I get the impression that English is kind of like a strong second language for a lot of people over there. Was that the case?
I would think. I mean, Japanese people study it for, I mean, how many years? I think they start studying in elementary school now, and they study it at least all the way through high school. But you would be surprised how little Japanese people can speak English. Now, there are a decent number of people who they can read and write it pretty decently. In terms of speaking, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how, if you just picked a Japanese person off the street, they probably could not do more than, very, very basic conversation.
I'd say, I mean, obviously that it feels like, they do emphasize a little bit more, but I'm sure it's no different than the average American who, with whatever class they took in high school, they couldn't tell you a word or two of it either. So,
for sure, I took 2 years of Spanish, and I can maybe count to 10, and that's about it.
I remember more.
They're a little bit better than that, but I think that gives you a good impression. I think
I had a teacher that emphasized a lot of French in elementary school, and I bet I remember more of that than anything I took in high school. That's I don't know.
That was actually part of the reason I wanted to study Japanese, is because I took Spanish in high school. It's not that I hated it. I do think Spanish is a very cool language in a lot of its own ways, but I think just the experience of going through like high school language learning was just like, oh, I want to do nothing close to Spanish ever again. And so that rules out like Italian and French and all those. So I'm like, I'm going to do something completely different. And that's part of the reason why I think
I think a lot of people would take that if it was an option in high school over those other languages.
That's true. Yeah.
There's certainly an interest. I mean, as Japanese games have gained popularity here, it's nothing new. This has been a long trend. So I think that'd be really cool if that was an option for people.
Yeah, I think it would be too. But I think in reality, the way that people are taught Japanese in school can be like not super effective sometimes. What I mean by that is, I know a lot of people who, I even know people, Japanese was their major. When they went to Japan, they could not communicate. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times, like in a normal Japanese class, they try to teach you as if like they are teaching a Japanese child. And just due to the way the language is structured, which I'm sure we'll get more into later, but it's not always the most effective way to learn and pick up the language, in my opinion, which is part of the reason why I'm hoping that this game can be a good tool for self-learners.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that's why we brought you on. So we'll stop talking about Spanish
Sure.
high school classes. That's always the way that goes on this show. We get down that. So you told us a little about yourself. Is this the first game that you've kind of worked on, or did you have some experience with some other things first?
This is the first game I've worked on. And honestly, I don't think I would be developing if it weren't this game. When I was studying Japanese, I had ideas of this game. And so, I think this is the game that I've always wanted to develop. So just going all in, and I'm chasing it.
And that's what it's all about, is you've got to find something you're passionate about and do it. Otherwise, it's going to show in your work. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you say it's your first one, but I mean, did you ever tinker around with some basic things like in high school, or is this, purely you learned your tools and this is what you're going for?
Yeah, I mean, I've tinkered around, not with like game programming. I've tinkered around with programming before, and if it's just basic things like making a website, HTML, that kind of stuff. That's kind of how it started. But I've tinkered around in some programming, but this is the first I'm going to make a game. This has been a totally new experience for me in a lot of ways.
That's really cool. There's a lot of people that would love to try to do that, and so. I just off the top of my head, I don't know of any other games that are trying to do this, maybe for other languages perhaps, but this is so is that what you kind of realized? Not only is this something you wanted to do, but this was a gap in the market?
Yeah, it's a gap in the market in one way. There are a couple of other games that have kind of implemented the idea. And so the reason why I think there is a gap in the market and why I'm making the game is if there wasn't, I I wouldn't be. I'm an econ major, my market, studying all that kind of stuff. But the reason why I don't think there's any game that's taken off is because most of them are out there. And, all due respect, some of them are great games. They are primarily a game and not really a very serious language learning tool. Like if you were to bring them up in Japanese language learning community, which was something I was really tied into when I was studying the language. Nobody would really recommend them because they're not really very serious tools for studying the languages. They could be fun and cool supplements, things like that. But no, we're hoping to create a game that is the first. It is a game, but it is also like if you beat this game, you actually have a knowledge of Japanese. And so that's why it's not just going to be one game, because you can't teach everything you need to know about language in a single game unless you want a game that takes you over 1,000 hours to beat. That's why we're splitting into 5 separate games to hopefully take the time to build the foundation that you need in order to learn and understand.
Yeah, you kind of touched on one of our things we're going to be talking about that is broken up into 5 different parts. Is that like,
right.
Like maybe like chapters in a grand tale, or is it going to be once you get to the end of the first game, you're going to have a certain set of skills that would lead you into the next one? You need to go in order those games, correct?
That's correct. If you're starting from 0, I would definitely recommend going in order. But basically, I won't give an entire rundown because I'd take the whole episode of how you would learn Japanese. But to put it simply, the first thing you have to learn is their versions of the alphabet. And there are 3 alphabets in Japanese. One is hiragana, and one is called katakana. Hiragana, to put it simply, is like the closest version they have our alphabet.
Okay.
Katakana is basically the same thing, except it's used in different situations. So hiragana is used for just normal words. Katakana, again, to oversimplify it and explain it, is used for like imported and foreign. Is not a native Japanese word. So I would write it in the second alphabet. Basically, those first 2 alphabets are the same. There are not so many characters. There's less than 100 between the 2 of them. But the third alphabet is where everybody gets killed. It's called kanji. And I've told you, I've met people who have majored in Japanese and they still struggle with kanji because you need to learn over 2,000 characters just to have like a basic proficiency in the language. I think it's 2,146 or something like that the Japanese government say these are like the required kanji, what you need to be able to read a newspaper and quote unquote be literate adult in the language. Well, obviously that's a huge barrier to entry. A lot of different, but that's one of the things that there's a lot of debate in the Japanese community about the best way to study those characters, the best way to learn it, because that is the hurdle that people inevitably get caught up on. But in addition to that, there are all the normal parts of learning a language. You have to learn the grammar, and to have a decent vocabulary in a language, you could probably get by in a basic conversation with, again, this is just, general statement, but the most common 3,000 words, you could get through a decent amount of conversation, but you probably wouldn't be fluent. Once you hit 7,000, you're probably feeling pretty comfortable. And once you hit around 10,000, the general consensus is that's when you have a pretty solid command of the language. It could, drop you in Japan, and in almost any situation, if you're able to use those 10,000 words and those grammar points effectively, you'd basically be able to get around in almost any situation. So that's a lot to learn, right? I think a lot of Japanese games so far have taught, I'll teach like 200 words, which is cool. And it's 200 words that you didn't know before. So I don't mean to put down anybody else, but the reality is it's not a sprint. It's a marathon up a mountain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so 5 games, to get back to that. The first one, we just focus on teaching you Japanese alphabets, hiragana, katakana, and the around 2,000 kanji that aren't necessary to become literate in the language. And there's a test called the JLPT, which is the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. It's not a perfect standard of somebody's Japanese ability, but it's basically the best most like traditional standard that's used to judge how good somebody is at Japanese. So basically, the first 2 levels, it's split up like N1 is the top level, and then N5 is like lowest level. So N5 and N4, there's not too much content in there. We'll put that in the one game. And then N3 will have a game, N2 will have a game, and N1. So it's kind of split up in that way. The first game is kind of the alphabets. Then games 2 through 5 will be based off of those different JLPT levels.
Gotcha. That's a lot to take in, but I know it is a lot to take in. What age is this kind of geared more towards adults, or is this something that younger kids could play as well? What's it kind of geared towards?
Yeah, I mean, again, it is nothing like offensive in it to like children.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a serious language learning tool, and that I wouldn't give it to an elementary school kid and expect them to understand everything. You know what I mean? Because there are if you're learning a language, there are some difficult things that you have to learn. So it just depends. I would say gifted your high schooler may be able to do it. High schooler probably do it, but probably best suited for a young adult would be my guess.
Okay.
We'll play test it and we'll figure that out. The audience is definitely geared towards that.
Okay. I mean, as a father of a 6-year-old, I know exactly how hard it is to get, there's plenty of games that are made to help them learn the language, but it either goes to pure fun or pure educational. It's kind of hard to get that balance to where they actually want to play it and are still learning something at the same time.
Sure. And that is one of the challenges that I think a lot of games up to this point have had in making that. And I think it's very difficult to. I think that's why games will only teach you 200 to 500 words, because they want to balance what you're actually learning with a good amount of fun. And that is one of the most interesting parts of developing for us, because I think we looked at it from a different approach. As I just kind of mentioned previously, we kind of started with, okay, this is what we have to teach. But at the same time, how are we going to make it so that you're not just, as you said, it doesn't just turn into a strictly educational game. I think, all right, ideally it would be 80% fun, 80% learning, or 70 to 30. I think I'm not going to hit that. We try to aim for like a 50-50 of like, oh, I'm purely having fun, and okay, no, like I'm actually learning. And, learning is fun. So, I mean, that blend is obviously going to be different for people, but you're absolutely right. That is definitely a challenge, but that's why I think our game it's going to have a lot of content, because there are a lot of things you have to learn, and we also want to cram in a bunch of fun. So there's going to be a lot of content for people.
It kind of sounds like, and I think this is where people go wrong in their game developers who are trying to maybe teach something, and if I'm incorrect with this, it kind of sounds like you're more of a teacher trying to develop a game, which the goal is to learn. And if you have fun along the way, that's fantastic. But you're specifically wanting people to learn how to speak and write this language, whereas other people are just trying to occupy people's times, basically.
Yeah, and it's a balance, of course, because and it is a game. So I do want people. Fun should definitely be a crucial part of it, and the achievement of that and all that kind of stuff is definitely a crucial part of the game. But yeah, no, in terms of where we started with, okay, I studied Japanese on my own. I basically 100% learned it myself just through my own self-studying. Well, I know, okay, if somebody actually wants to be good at this language, this is what they need to know. And that is definitely, we built the game around that concept. That's very true.
Is this like, if somebody were to go through at least a couple of the games, would this be something that they could then use to, let's say, play Japanese import games? Or would they need to really do all 5 of them to have a firm grasp of it?
I would say the first game lays a foundation. So first game is really meant to get through the most difficult part, which is learning kanji, the biggest barrier to entry, learning Japanese, which is that. So then after the second game, though, you learn some more practical Japanese. You pick up on grammar. You're starting to pick up on, say, the first 2,500 words, which is probably what we'll teach you in the first game. You could probably pick up Pokemon at that point to kind of, Animal Crossing. I'm thinking those types of games.
Right. And
you would be able to not know every word, but you would be able to get through the game. That third game, you could probably a game like Pokemon pretty comfortably. But if you want to play a hardcore, like, you know what I mean? Like you have to, you know what I mean? Like Japanese, a game geared towards like Japanese adults. That would probably take more like into the fourth or fifth game.
Okay. That's I only say that because one of the most frustrating parts of our genre is the wait on some of these games to get a translation into English over here. So I was just kind of spurting that off the top of my head. What game would you say this one kind of resembles the most, or is it just completely unique? Is there any inspiration behind it as far as a game that you were thinking of?
So I would say that's tough because it is a mix of games. But if I were to answer the question simply, I think the game that I love the most and that I'm probably influenced the most in designing it is Pokemon. I think that should be clear from the visuals as well as certain aspects of the game. But it does have a lot of aspects in the game that are not like Pokemon. There are parts that are very, that I would say are from other RPGs. I think it's more of a, like, how do I explain it? See, it's tough for me because you're programming and you're calling it a JRPG, especially because I'm coming here, I'm talking to the JRPG experts. I want to really be sure I'm getting everything right.
You're doing great so far.
Thank you so much. But I know, like, JRPG, there are some common elements of it. For example, is there going to be like a party? I don't think so, because primarily it's a game that I want you to learn. You know what I mean? I don't want there to be any AI. I don't want there to be any of those sorts of extra complications. In addition, one thing that I've really gone back and forth about, whether or not there's going to be, for example, leveling up in the game. That's a standard of RPG on one hand. But on the other hand, that means I have to sit here and say, oh, if you do this, right, like, you have learned this much of the language. And that's a tough thing to do. But two, everybody is going to learn their own pace and in their own ways. And there are a lot of different aspects of the game that are going to teach. Some people will do better learning from different aspects of the game. So I don't want to, like, assign experience points to doing a specific task. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, like, I mean, you don't want to say, okay, I spoke to my neighbor today and I got 5 XP. That's not really. I don't know. I don't even know how you do levels either. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, to be quite honest.
So because of that, like, it has a lot of elements of the JRPGs, but it also has been, there's some things that are probably going to be noticeably absent, I guess, or a super hardcore, like, oh, this isn't a JRPG. This doesn't have, like, I don't know. I don't know how particular people are about their games, but long story short, it wasn't only influenced by JRPGs. It was probably influenced by a variety of game types in order to make sure that everybody could learn.
Yeah, I think it could definitely be qualified as one, obviously, because you're trying to learn Japanese. So that's one of the basics is it's influenced. The look of it is obviously, like you said, it's kind of, I wasn't going to throw you out there saying it looked like Pokemon, but you said it's influenced. So there you go. By the single person,
yes.
And it's got that single party member. So that's more like, the early Dragon Quest, the very first one. So that was kind of what I just saw just by glancing at it.
Yeah, no, that is a pretty accurate understanding of where I'm coming from.
Now, you told me this in a conversation we had that you just downloaded Dragon Quest for your phone. Is that correct?
No, I downloaded it on the Switch, actually. I didn't even know they had it, but I looked it up and got the first Dragon Quest on the Switch, and I was really excited because, the Switch, one of the really cool things about the latest generation of consoles, at least for the Switch, I'm not sure about Xbox or PlayStation, that if I just switch my Switch, sorry, confusing wording. If I switch my Switch into Japanese, most of the games that I play then automatically change to the language to Japanese. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, really cool. I'm going to play Dragon Quest. It's one of the classic JRPGs. Let me play it in Japanese. I changed it to Japanese, but the language didn't change. And I'm like, what the heck? There wasn't a Japanese version of Dragon Quest available on the Switch. I'm like,
oh, man.
Yeah. So I'm trying to play it in English, and I didn't realize that they were going to use like Old English.
Yes. Yes.
You go in and like, oh, where doth you? And I'm like, oh, this might even be easier to understand in Japanese. You know what I mean?
Those early ones, the first one especially, it was. Oh yeah, it was bad. They've gotten better over the years. They still have like a British influence and accents and stuff like that, but they talk a little more normal. But yeah, that first one, I mean, not only is it hard to read, but then you're pressing the button to walk downstairs and you're pressing the button to open a door. It was that first one was pretty weird looking back on it.
Yeah, you said that because like I think a lot of times we look at games and we're like, oh, why is there so much hand-holding going on in games these days? Why are they making it so this and that? Playing this first game, I'm like, okay, I kind of get it now. Because like trying to figure it out on your own, you're like, what am I doing right? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't, as a child I played that game. That's one of the things that got me into JRPGs was that game alone. But no way, shape, or form could I get very far at all. It wasn't until I was basically an adult that I was able to go back and beat that game. It's they don't do anything for you. You just, here you go have fun to beat the final boss eventually.
So yeah, I'm glad that's not just me.
No, that is, I mean, you couldn't get where we are today without all that back in the day, but that's, so maybe you should definitely play through that, and that'll give you a little more inspiration on what you can shoot for.
Yeah, and I think that's been, one of the things I've been trying to do, get more into JRPGs to, as well as other games, but especially JRPGs, to get more of those influences. And wanting to know more about JRPGs is what let me hear. So listening to your podcast. So, that's it's been great.
Well, I appreciate that. We try to inform, educate, and have fun at the same time. So we're speaking the same language there. Are there any JRPGs that you have played that you really have taken to that you've enjoyed over the year, or like I said, you're still kind of trying to get into them other than like Pokemon? I
mean, I was a big Nintendo guy growing up.
Okay.
And so I owned all of the Nintendo systems except the Wii U for whatever reason.
That's okay. Nobody else did.
Yes. Everybody felt that way about that. So, I mean, in terms of like RPGs I played specifically growing up, I mean, right? Paper Mario, I guess I would consider that a JRPG.
Yes.
It's probably the one I was the most into. I love that game, Paper Mario, and then various sequels until the recent sequels, which not as exciting for me, Sticker Star and stuff like that. I would say, because of that Nintendo person, that was probably the one I played the most.
Yeah, Paper Mario is a hit or miss for me. Like Thousand Year Door was one of my all-time favorites, and it still had that. I still consider that to be a true JRPG, whereas the other ones, once they got away from the turn-based battle system, they're fun, but they kind of lost some of those mechanics, the grinding and all that stuff that made that one so great.
I didn't have fun.
Now, I am looking forward to the new one, just on terms of how cool it looks and.
I agree. Origami, what is it? Origami King, something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
I agree. Hopefully, they go back to old days.
Now,
I'm trying to sound like an old guy.
No, that's what we do every day. Is like, I wish they were like these old games.
There you go.
I don't know. We've seen so little of the battle system. It's kind of hard to say exactly where it lies at. But maybe it looks pretty. It looks like fun. It's Nintendo, so you kind of know what you're going to get at least.
Yeah, for sure.
This, without being an insult and saying this looks like a mobile game. Is that kind of your market, or are you trying to go to consoles as well?
I think we'll start on console because it is, or excuse me, not console, PC.
Okay.
Because I think that's just the easiest simplest launch to do. So we'll be on Steam and stuff like that, and that will be the primary launch, if you will. But no, absolutely, mobile is also where we're going with it, and I think that the aesthetic of it definitely appeals to a lot of people who do mobile games as well. So I'm hoping we'll find success there.
I don't see why not. I mean, that seems to be an obvious application for people to be able to play it on the go when they've got time. Or PC is great. Now, is this something that you kind of would need a keyboard on the PC that would help you? Or
see, that's the difficulty. That's the reason why I don't think the game is suitable for console, because I thought about it, because I think due to on one hand, I do think a lot of the aspects of the game are very suitable for mobile, but the amount of content in the game and like how much I expect, how much time I expect it will take, that I expect to honestly be console PC game, like, more suitable for that type of player. And so, yeah, but that's the thing, is in order to make it the best language learning tool, there are two things that make it difficult for console, in my opinion. And one is that, yeah, it does require some typing,
okay,
which is difficult on console. But two, there's also an aspect of the game where you can practice writing the characters. And if you're on the PC, that would be with your mouse. And if you're on mobile, obviously that would just be screen. So that also I think would be difficult on console. So that's why PC and mobile right now are where we're focused.
I guess you could see, would need to draw on the screen switch could be a possibility, but yeah, the typing with the on-screen keyboard is just, it's not fun. It's
not so fun.
It's really not. Can you speak about what a release window would be when you're trying to bring at least out the first one in terms of this year, next year?
We're hoping Q1 2021.
Okay.
I say that tentatively.
Yeah, of course.
Because this whole COVID-19 thing has done a lot of things back. On one hand, it's nice because I have more time in my house to develop it, but on the other hand, there's a lot of things that need to be done in order to get the game finished that cannot be done to the current circumstances. So, yeah, I say that tentatively.
Oh yeah, we've seen no shortage of delays, and I mean, it seems like it's definitely every game recently has had at least a month or a month and a half delay just for that, let alone if they were in a position where people were having to work from home. That's just not, I don't know how you do, larger scale game development at your house. Maybe something like yourself, you could do it on your own computer, but that would be pretty difficult.
It is, COVID-19 has just affected everybody. What I mean, I think my fiance actually she got coronavirus. And,
oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, she's better now, but it was not an experience. And she's Japanese, and so she's kind of the native Japanese who's helping me with a lot of that native Japanese type of, right? Even thing like that sets you back quite a bit.
Of course.
And recover from something like that. So
I'm sure, but every time you mess it up, she's right there to let you know that that's just terrible.
Absolutely. Now that I moved back to the States, obviously I speak Japanese to my fiance every day. I speak Japanese at work, so it's not like I've forgotten. But it's there are a lot of weird words and phrases that you just don't use when you aren't living in Japan. When I went back to Japan for New Year's, it happened many times where I'd be saying something. It's just I don't know. This is what you mean. Yeah. That happens for sure.
That's it. Or they just kind of look at you seriously. I mean, you can't even speak English. You don't even speak English well, let alone our own language.
Sure. And it's one of those things where at first when you're dating, she's not comfortable enough, but now that we're engaged and now she's very comfortable. Nope, this is what's correct. And it's oh, all right, good to know.
Well, congratulations on that, by the way, and hopefully, I know you told me, that things are a little distant right now, and you got a world apart, but hopefully things will calm down and you guys can get back together here real soon.
Oh yeah, no, I think obviously it's good to be in this generation in terms of long distance dating, because even though we're not next to each other, we're talking right now. So our relationships have been good in that extent. It's just visas, man. What do you get these days?
Can you imagine, you go back to our grandfathers and stuff, or writing letters and having, they're off at war and they're sending a letter back home. I can't even imagine that disconnect where we're so lucky we can pick up a phone or we can just get on our computer. We can see each other even. We're truly living in amazing times.
Absolutely. So very grateful for that.
Absolutely. Getting back, is this, I guess you probably haven't thought about pricing or anything along that far yet, have you?
No, it is definitely going to be, at least for our, initial launch, it's going to I'm not looking to break anybody's bank with the game. You know what I mean? I don't expect it to be a super expensive game, but no, we're still working on it. Yeah. We'll probably go around with that as we go along. So no announcements on that yet.
I was saying that more of like, this is not a free game. This is a we're not giving. You're not giving something away, and then I've got to watch an ad every 3 minutes, right?
No, nothing like that. That is not the initial. That is not the approach we're taking.
Have you looked at? Have you already done this? I didn't see anything. A Kickstarter or Patreon type support as far as from the fans.
So I've thought about it, and I'm not 100% opposed to the idea of a Kickstarter or a Patreon. Mm-hmm. But I think lately, especially Kickstarter, not a bad rap.
Yeah.
Especially looking at Kickstarter, and no disrespect to any dev who takes that route, because understandably, it is one way to fund a game, and so I don't need to diss it, but I know just in my research of people who said they were going to build Japanese games, even in that small window alone, I saw multiple people who got significant amounts of money. Then either the game never came out or it came out almost a decade later. That's an exaggeration, but I don't necessarily want to take that route. Patreon, maybe, but that's not. If we can do it without a Patreon, my mentality is, if you are going to give me money, I want to give you something of value. Makes sense. I don't want you to give me money for like some sort of future promise or investment. So one thing we've even thought about is launching a merchandise store. So if anybody wants to support the game before it comes out, buy a t-shirt, you're actually getting something. You know what I mean? We've thought about options like that, but Patreon, once we have more of a I can actually be confident and say I can give you something if you join our Patreon, that might be one option we take. No, I'm open to opinions. What do you think? What do the listeners think? I'm all ears to people's opinions on those things.
I always look at it from a point, like if you do a Patreon and like you talk about t-shirts, hey, do this, level, and then you get a t-shirt type of deal. That's always cool in my mind. But yeah, Kickstarter, gosh, countless games have been beyond fully funded and we never even hear of them again. They just disappear and there goes your money. Or, I think that'd put a lot of pressure on a developer as well. I've got all this money and no different than getting an independent backer, a funder that way. But, then you've got that, and you do hear a lot of success stories, but then you've got Mighty Number 9. So much money poured into it, and then it's a subpar game at best.
That definitely happens, and so that's why I don't want to shoot myself in the foot in case 6 months later I say we need a Kickstarter to fund the game, but I'm pretty sure we'll be okay with that.
Well, and of course, you've got plenty of time to try to go with that. What would you say is your goals as far as like numbers, or just trying to put out the best game you possibly can to get people to learn?
I think first and foremost, it is a passion. We're going to make a game that mixes in fun, as well as serious Japanese learning. I think that's the first and foremost goal, is not a game of quality. In terms of what I hope for sales, I mean, if I can break even, that'd be nice, of course. But I think there is a big demand for this. I think if it's done right, I think people will really enjoy the game. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't have a specific goal that I want to announce publicly to the world, but I'm optimistic.
Now, I just picked up on something. You've said we. Are you guys? Is there a team back home that you're working with? Are you the only one here in the US?
Yeah, mostly my fiance.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I know. We're mostly making the game by ourselves. I think for some of the stuff, I'm outsourcing it. So, but primarily the game is us two.
Okay, I thought so, but hey, it never hurts to ask, right?
No, that's right.
Where can people find out more about this? I know you've got your website and a Facebook page. Do you want to go ahead and plug those for them?
Yeah, for sure. I think Facebook is our most active community right now. So believe it or not, we kind of still consider the game to be in like a pre-announcement phase, because we really haven't launched a trailer. I wasn't even really expecting the game to gain the kind of publicity that it has. But here we are. We have a good community building around Facebook, and so that's number one. But we're hoping to expand. This will air. Will this air Sunday or next Sunday?
It'll be this Sunday, the 31st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that's okay. Because I think this Saturday, literally this Saturday, we're going to be launching a Discord as well. So
Fantastic.
we'll be launching Discord. I'm on. Facebook. We're just Nihongo Quest. Facebook.com/Nihongo Quest. Our Discord, you can find it there. Our website, nihongoquest.com. That's NIHONGO quest.com. There you can sign up for our emailing list as well. And if anybody wants to talk to me, they have ideas, they're excited about the game, whatever it is, they can shoot our page a message. I respond to those. You can find me on Twitter. Bailey Armstrong. There are a million of them. What's my actual name? Bailey _ENG, I think. My name, so feel free to find me there, but that's everything.
If you're like me, you avoid Twitter except for work reasons.
There you go. Yeah, it is a distracting place, that's for sure.
It's a wealth of knowledge. It's also a cesspool. It's really it's so bad. But yeah, I will personally attest to your promptness on Facebook. You were like, every time we'd start talking, it was message right away. It was pretty cool.
I try my best.
Except when you're actually doing some work and then somebody tries to message you in the middle of that. That's always fun.
That is always a challenge, but we do our best. And I think for the pages, it might not be right away, but I'll usually get back to people then.
And I'll make sure I put all the links down in the description. So
hey, perfect. That helps even better.
Oh yeah, okay. I can at least do that for you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you kind of wanted to touch on? I think we've went through a pretty good amount of it, but anything else you want to kind of throw out there?
First, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to come on here and talk about the game. But I just think really hope anybody who's interested in learning Japanese can look more into it, look us up, and I'm at the point where I can still implement suggestions. So if you think, oh, this idea would be really cool to put in the game, I'm super open to ideas. If anybody has feedback, mine's always available.
That's fantastic. Are you looking at maybe like a yearly release schedule or a bi-yearly, ideally, for the other series of games?
Ideally, it would be yearly.
Okay.
Ideally, we do it in 6 months, but it doesn't always work that way. But ideally, we'll be doing at least yearly releases.
Okay. Obviously, once you have the initial build there, it won't be as hard to do the subsequent games.
Right. The foundation will be key. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Lord of the Rings. You're not filming all 5 of them at the same time and releasing it later.
No, that's not the plan.
No, no. Excellent. All right, Bailey, I think we'll wrap things up. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you. And maybe here, as we get closer to release date and you've got something to show off to the world, we'll have another chat and see how things are going.
Absolutely. Would love to be back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Bailey, I know you've listened to a couple podcasts, and I kind of threw Jordan under the bus last week, but do you know what we say at the end of it?
Oh, you're throwing me under the bus here.
Yeah, I do. That's what I do best. Well, why don't you tell the people to get back out there and level up?
All right. Everybody, man, I blew it. Okay, let me do that one more time.
Okay.
Everybody, back out there and level up.
All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. It's been very enlightening and a lot of fun to get to talk with a new friend, and hopefully we'll check back in with him as the game progresses, and we'll have some updates for you guys in the near future. As for next Sunday, I don't really know what to tease other than to say that it is entirely possible for the month of June we may have to do 2 podcasts a week, as E3 is supposed to be going on around this time of year, and there's a lot of digital events that are going to happen to the point to where if something breaks, let's say Friday or Saturday of that week, I may just end up doing a podcast instead of doing a Sunday special. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But I'm kind of thinking June's going to be a pretty busy time from what I can gather. And so we'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much for listening in to this. Has been Sunday special number 19. My name is James Fisher. As always, thank you for listening, subscribing, and liking on YouTube, giving us a like and a follow on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're so inclined and love what you're hearing, it would certainly help us out if you would support the podcast via your financial contribution. You can do that by either clicking on the Patreon link, or you can support directly on Anchor. Either way, I'd be very appreciative. We'll talk to you guys next time. Until then, get back out there and level up. Check back each day for a daily JRPG video.